So today we're having a look at the GCM scale truck frame called 410. This frame is specifically built around a New Bright 10-inch wheelbase Jeep TJ, and as you can see, we got lots of room in the front to put our winch mount, and there's lots of options on this chassis that just makes it ready to go. So first of all, let's have a look at the clearance inside the truck. If you look underneath the shell of this truck, there's lots of room for everything. We got lots of room to put the drive line. The drive line fits underneath the belly pan of the truck perfectly. With the long Tamiya springs from the F350, we still have room to fit them into the frame rails and still get a 10-inch wheelbase. There's lots of room for drive shafts up there, and you can easily put the battery behind the dash or the option part from GCM, which has the remote servo, allowing you to set up the steering wheel and everything all at the same time. Now, if we have a look at where the clearances are on the chassis, we'll just turn it over here and have a look. As you can see, our shock mount is sitting right on the floor, and the frame of the truck is right along the bumper line, so it would be real easy to set that up with a rear bumper. We've got lots of room in there for the wheels. This particular truck is using the GCM cast aluminum G series Mercedes wheel, as well as the rotors and 5-bolt hubs. This chassis allows for lots of room in the front of the 10-inch TJ for electronics here. You've got lots of room for the motor and speed control up top. Literally you can put your hand in there between the top of the hood and the motor. It'd be real easy to have the hood off and have a scale motor in there as well. So let's have a look at the frame and the running gear inside. With the body off, it's a little clearer to see the setup on the truck. The frame rails, in this case, have been cut off, actually 7 mount holes from the back. So this wheelbase is allowable all the way up to just over 12 inches and all the way down to 10 inches, just because you can adjust the spring eyes in the rear, as well as flipping the front shackles so that you can bring the mount just ahead or just behind to match up to your wheelbase perfectly. Now in this case, we've used the GCM transfer case mounted down low on the 410 chassis combo, and we've also mounted the servo down low so that when we set up our drive line, we've got something that's as much stock as possible. Now in this case, we're also using the stock ride height spring shackles. There are the optional 3-inch lift kit spring mounts as well, and shackles, which will be coming out later, as well as the remote servo mount kit. But as we have set this up in a stock configuration, we want to highlight a couple of geometry issues that are specifically designed into the 410 chassis. One of them is caster. So the 410 was specifically designed to have 3 degrees of pinion angle towards the transfer case, and in the rear we also have 3 degrees of pinion angle towards the transfer case. So even as your suspension compresses, you'll have lots of room in there to keep the drive line as smooth as you can. And because we're using the axial truck axles, the caster that's built into the axle as well actually gives you just a little bit of positive caster, and so it's a real easy way to keep the wheels in the right place at the right time. The truck responds really well to gearing changes, although there's just enough room in here for a 19-tooth pinion and this stock axial 87-tooth spur. But if you go all the way down to, say, a 13-14 tooth, you can make the truck crawl real well with the axial drive line, which is as proven as anything. And using the GCM transfer case, we have a 1-to-1 ratio in there, so whatever you pick up front is whatever you're going to get at the wheels. Now with a smaller 1.9 rim like what we're showing here, and a small 10-inch wheelbase Jeep, you may want to go up to a small 3-cell battery so you can get some decent trail speed. The 410 combo kit also comes with the center drive shaft to match the transmission, the axial transmission, which is mounted in the front, and to drive the transfer case with something that you know isn't going to take off when you're climbing up a hill. This is a solid steel dog bone that's been hardened, and we've got great drive shaft crups here that fit directly onto the axial case and directly onto the GCM transfer case. And as you already know, the GCM transfer case is not going to break anytime, so you should have no problems with reliability on the drivetrain at all. So let's have a look at some of the part details in the assembly of this particular vehicle. So we're going to turn our attention to the spring mounts now, and as you can see, we're using a stock axial truck axle, and we've shaved off the eye mounts here that are used for the bottom links and the shock mount. The rest of the axle has been trimmed on top to get rid of the servo mounts, and it makes a nice clean setup. As you can see, there's no extra material left on these. So what we've done is we've taken the GCM spring mounts now. This is a U-bolt style spring mount, actually machined out of solid billet aluminum, and these simply clip on to the bottom of the axle like this. Once you shave the rod end eyes off of the axle, then you can simply clip these onto the bottom like this. The second part of the process is to take the mid plate, and the mid plate, as you can see, has a cutout on one side, and that little cutout in the bottom fits right around this section of the axial right here. So it fits right directly on top of there, and when those two are screwed together, you actually sandwich the axle in between the mid plate and the lower U-bolt part. Now as you can see in the mid plate, there's this great little eye here. Now this pin here is specifically designed to fit onto the center hole of the spring. That locates the spring on the axle, and when these are installed and you push them all the way out so that that little channel that's made in the mid plate fits right over top of the axial dual hole boss there, it'll totally clamp the spring right in there. This is the shock mount, the standard shock mount that comes with the combo kit. This shock mount also holds the spring in line. You can see there's a channel in the bottom of it, and there's a hole there for that center pin on the mid plate. And this would, when you're installing this in the front, you would want to install it with the shock mount toward the outside, so it clears the frame. And when you install it in the rear, you can install it with the shock mount towards the inside, so it'll clear the frame on the inside when you have your rear shocks angling inwards. This part simply clips on to the top part, and then you have a stack right there that holds the leaf, as you can see. And this stack will have 4 screws that are attached all the way through it, all the way around. And when that's done, you end up with an assembly that looks just like this. The axle is completely clamped inside the U-bolt, the mid plate, and the top plate and shock mount with those 4 screws, and your leaf springs are ready to go in there. Now these mounts are specifically intended for 1, 2, or 3 stacked leaves. They will hold 3 leaves without having any modifications done whatsoever, and of course all the way down to 1 leaf, and you can get a little extra articulation with this trick that the leaf builders have been using for years by trimming just a little bit off the top inside corners of the leaf eye. That'll give you a little more articulation. So at this point we're going to install the axles. We've now assembled the front and rear axles with the spring mounts, and the leaf springs are already on. So we're simply going to install the axles, or the springs and axles now into the frame. And basically the easiest way to do this is to simply line it up, sit the springs into the spring eyes so that you can simply put the screw right through. And the way these are intended is for the screws to actually start threading on the outside of the spring eye. And as they thread through, they will thread all the way through the spring eye, and you just snug it up at the end, and there you go. Your leaf spring is now attached. We do the exact same thing on the rear swing. You start the thread on the outside, and you can simply screw it straight through, and as it gets to the end it'll tighten up, and there you go. You've got your spring right there. We'll go ahead and do that on the other 3. So that's our overview of the GCM 410 chassis as set up with a 10-inch wheelbase and axial drive axles. And all these parts, as well as the option parts we've mentioned, can be seen at gcmachine.ca.